So what we'll do basically is that we'll read the question together. You'll tell me what you think is the answer, and I'll tell you what I think is the answer, and then we'll check it from the marking scheme. So the first question over here says, what is the purpose of trying to achieve economic efficiency? What is the purpose of trying to achieve economic efficiency? To achieve full employment, to achieve cheapest possible price for products, to ensure resources are not wasted, to use as many resources as possible. So what is the purpose of achieving economic efficiency, right? So you think C, I also think it's C. Let's check with the marking scheme. Let's check with the marking scheme. Right. So one is C. Okay, great. The next question says, in the diagram, the firm chooses its output, increases its output from OY to OZ. This is Y and this is Z, right? So if it's increasing its production from OY to OZ, which statement about the effect on economic efficiency is correct? Which statement about the effect on economic efficiency is correct? It will increase because greater quantity will be produced and higher total revenue will be earned, right? Greater quantity will be produced and a higher total revenue will be earned. It will increase because the value that consumers place on the product comes closer to the cost of producing the last unit. It will decline because both average and marginal cost will fall. Sorry, marginal revenue will fall. And it will decline because total and marginal cost will rise. So what do you think is the answer? Sorry about that. Okay, so what's the answer? You think it's B? Yes. So we did talk about this in our class, that the allocative efficiency exists where the price of the product is equals to its marginal cost, right? So have a look at this. So the idea is fairly simple, that you have downward sloping, which is your demand curve, right? On the y-axis, you have the price and the cost, and on the x-axis, you have the quantity, right? So you have price and cost on the y-axis, and you have quantity on the x-axis, right? So this downward sloping demand curve shows you the price, and this J-shaped graph is showing you the marginal cost, right? So your allocative efficiency exists where price is equals to marginal cost, right? So when you're moving from this output level 0 to this output level, let's say QA, your allocative efficiency is increasing. C and D are not valid. Exactly, C and D are not valid, right? So B is the answer. Let's check if B is the answer. So the answer is 2 is B. Very good. Okay, let's move to the next question. A proposal for a new power project was rejected by the government because it was not socially beneficial. The government calculated that the private cost would be 800 million, private benefit would be 900 million, and the external benefits will be 300 million, right? So what must have been true about the external cost of the power station? What do you think? Yeah. So how do countries decide whether they should continue with the project or should they not? What must be true about the external cost of the power station? Right. What do you think? Right? The answer is B, absolutely, right? So the answer is B because then if you're, right, 3 is B, absolutely, right? So when you add external cost and private cost, that gives you social cost. If social costs are exceeding the social benefits, then you do not continue with the project. On the other hand, if social benefits are greater than social costs, then you continue with the project, right? Okay, so the answer should be the external costs were greater than 400 million. Perfect. The next question says, what will happen if in response to a fall in its price, a consumers buy more of a good? What will happen if in response to a fall in its price, a consumer buys more of a good? The consumer buys more of a good. So when the price is falling, the consumer is buying more of a good. A fall in the total utility derived from consuming the good A movement along the consumer's demand curve, a rise in the marginal utility derived from consuming the good, a shift in consumer's demand curve. Fall in the price of a good, a consumer buys more of a good. What do you think? Right? But C is also making sense. A rise in marginal utility derived from consuming the good. Okay, so the answer should be B. Let me tell you why, and why is C incorrect. So let's first check. 4 should be B. Okay, now C is not the answer. Let me tell you. Isha, so the problem is, think about this. The marginal utility that you derive from each unit is the same, right? The marginal utility that you derive from each unit of the good is the same. It doesn't depend on the price, but yes, overall this thing will increase. I think perhaps you're confusing it with marginal utility per dollar. So marginal utility per dollar will increase if your price is decreasing, but this price doesn't affect the marginal utility directly. Are you getting me? Think about this. So have a look at this. So if I consume 4 cups of coffee per day, the first one is giving me, let's say, the marginal utility of 10 noodles. The second one gives me something less, 8, then it gives me 6, and then it gives me 4. So, right, are you getting me? Yes. So price, right now, I'm not thinking about the price of the good. All I'm doing is just listing my own satisfaction from each unit of the good. So in this case, I'm just listing my own satisfaction from each unit of the good, and I'm not concerned with the price. But yes, if price is decreasing, so let's say if it was initially 10, then it was 1 util. In the case of this thing, it was 1 util per dollar. One util per dollar, right? And then if it decreases, then the price decreases to, let's say, 8, or something less, let's say 5, then it will be something more than 1 util per dollar, and so on. So this overall value will increase if the price is decreasing, but your marginal utility is independent. Your marginal utility is independent of the price, right? So the answer was B. Okay, now the next question says, right, the next question, where is it? Okay, now here's the next question. The next question says the diagram shows 2 indifference curves. The diagram shows perfect 2 indifference curves and 2 budget lines for good X and good Y, right? So 2 budget lines and 2 indifference curves. The consumer initial position is at point F. So this was the initial position. The consumer's preferred final position becomes point H, right? So this is the final position, preferred, right? What does the movement from F to G represent? Do you remember we talked about this? So if there's a movement along the same indifference curve, so can you see there is movement along the same indifference curve? So F and G are on the same indifference curve. F and G are on the same indifference curve. So what will happen, right? What is that called? Substitution effect of a fall in the price of X. Yes, we know that the price of X is falling. Why? Because you're shifted from this budget line to this budget line. You shifted from this budget line to this budget line, right? And that is the movement along the same indifference curve is substitution effect. Moving along the same indifference curve is substitution effect. Very good. So 5 should be B. Let's quickly check. 5 should be B. 5 is, sorry, C. Yeah, C. We meant C. Okay, so that's absolutely correct. Okay, next question. Question 6 says, what is one of the long-term benefits of a firm of vertical integration? What is one of the long-term benefits to a firm of vertical integration? Right. Vertical integration. What was vertical integration? Do you remember? On concentration on activities in firm in which the firm has comparative advantage, a reduction in the total cost involved in agreeing contracts with other firms, an increase in firm's market share, improvement in efficiency resulting from increased use of market incentives. Concentration activities in the firm has a comparative advantage. So what do you think? What is one of the long-term benefits to a firm of vertical integration? Right. Okay. Think about this. Let me give you a recap. No worries. So there are three types of integration. Integration is when one firm merges with another. So what is integration? Integration is when one firm merges with another. Let me give you a quick overview of the three types of integration. So one is horizontal integration. Horizontal integration says when two firms of the same type, when two same type firms merge with each other, that is horizontal, right? So the simplest example of that could be, let's say, Jazz and Moblink, right? Or PSO and Shell, because these are exactly the same company. So that would be horizontal integration, right? Right? Is it making sense? Then you have vertical integration. What happens in vertical integration? That you merge with either your supplier or your raw material producer. So supplier of your raw material or the retailer of your product, right? So within vertical, you have two further types. So one is backward vertical integration and one is forward vertical integration. In backward vertical integration, what you do is that you merge with the supplier of raw material. You merge with the supplier of raw material. And an example of that could be, let's say, a clothing manufacturer merging with the cotton producer, right? Because cotton is an input to clothes manufacturing. So when that happens, that would be backward vertical integration. In the case of forward vertical integration, you merge with the retailer, whoever is selling that product. You merge with the retailer of that product. That is forward vertical integration, right? And then the third and the last type is known as conglomerate. What is conglomerate? When two unrelated businesses merge with each other. Conglomerate is, let's say, an online teaching platform merging with the hospital. So there's nothing in common between the two. So that is conglomerate, right? Is it making sense? Horizontal, two same type of businesses in the same industry and at the same stage of production process. In vertical, the industry is the same, but the stage of production process is different, right? So if a car manufacturer merges with the tire producer, so what is tire? Tires are input to the car manufacturing. So that would be backward vertical integration. In the case of forward, in the case of forward, you merge with the supplier of, you merge with the retailer of the product. In the case of backward, it is the raw material provider, supplier of raw material, right? So car manufacturing with tire manufacturing, supplier of raw material. And in the case of forward, it will be retailer of the good, product retailer, right? And conglomerate is when two unrelated businesses merge. Now, since it's talking about the vertical integration, a concentration on activities in the firm in which the firm has competitive advantage, I think this is referring to horizontal integration. A reduction in total cost involved in agreeing contracts with other firms. Increase in firms' market share, again, this is horizontal integration. Improvement in efficiency resulting from increased use of market incentives of vertical integration. You are saying B? Isha, you're saying B. So I think improvement efficiency is an increased use of market incentives. I would say it's D. I don't know, but I think D is making more sense. So let's check what is that. 6 is B. Hmm. Reduction in total cost involved in agreeing contracts with other firms. A reduction in total cost involved in agreeing contracts with other firms. Right. Agreeing contracts with other firms. Right. Okay, now this is a little tricky. The answer is B. Nisha, the answer is B. So you're right. I was thinking more about market incentives, because when you merge with suppliers, then you have incentives. You are getting cheaper raw materials, and similarly, when you merge with retailers, you get to better control the sale of your product. But okay. Election total cost involved in green contracts with the firms. Right. Yeah, makes sense. Right. So let's move to the next question. The next question says the organizers of a major sporting event produce official souvenir products. Cheaper unofficial souvenirs are also produced by street traders who sell them to people walking to the event. Of what is this an example? A contestable market, perfect competition, price discrimination, price leadership. Right. The organizers of a major sporting event produce official souvenir products, and cheaper unofficial souvenirs are also produced by street traders who sell them to people walking to the event. Of what is this an example? Of what is this an example? A contestable market, right? So what is a contestable market? Yeah, when it's easy to enter and exit the market. So when there are no trade barriers. So 7 is A. So what is a contestable market? When there are no trade barriers, right? It's really easy to enter and exit the market. That is what a contestable market is. So making souvenirs is not anything that is very difficult, and anyone can technically do that. So that is what makes it a contestable market. Okay. Which assumption is made in calculating a firm's short-run production function? Which assumption is made in calculating a firm's short-run production function? Okay, all factors of production are fixed. Do you know what a production function is? Isha, do you know what a production function is? If not, then I can give you a recap. All factors of production are variable. Right. So the state of technology is fixed. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So short run, the difference between short run and long run production function is, what is production function? Production function is a graph that shows the firm's output and the firm's input. So it basically shows the relationship between how much is being produced in terms of output based on how many inputs are used in the firm. Right. So you have output and you have input. In terms of input, you can either use labor or you can use capital or any of these things, right? So usually it looks like this, right? So it is increasing, but then comes a point when it becomes kind of constant, right? So this is what a production function is, right? Now, what's the difference between short run and long run? Because that was the main question. So short run is when at least one factor of production is variable. Short run is when at least one factor of production is fixed, other are obviously variable, right? And usually it is the capital or the technology, as we say, that is fixed in the short run. And in the long run, all factors of production are variable, including the capital, right? So the answer here should be, the state of technology is fixed, yes. So 8 should be C. 8 is C, right? 8 is C. Okay. In the diagram, TC is the firm's short-run total cost curve. Which statement is correct? Average total cost is minimized at OQ2, right? Marginal cost is minimized at OQ. Okay. Average cost is minimized at OQ1. Average cost is minimized at OQ3. Right. And the marginal cost is minimized at OQ2. Right. Increasing and increasing return. So what do you think? Right, sure. So average cost is total cost over total output. Total cost over total output. Right. So, right. Okay. Let me explain you. Marginal cost is minimized at OQ2. So marginal cost is the change in total cost, right? So it goes like this, goes like this, goes like this, goes like this, then this, and so on. I would say the marginal cost is minimized at OQ2. The answer should be D. Let me check. Right. So the answer should be 9 should be D. And 9 is D. Okay, let me answer you. Let me explain you this, right? So have a look at this. Let me take it to the whiteboard. Okay, so have a look at this. What is average total cost? Average total cost is basically total cost divided by total output. What is average total cost? Average total cost is total cost divided by total output. Right, so just a second. Okay, so you have a look at this. So you have cost on the y-axis and you have the output on the x-axis, right? Okay, now the thing is, this is how the graph looks like. This is somewhat like this, right? Okay, now average total cost, we already know it is total cost divided by total output, right? It shows you the cost of producing a typical unit of the good. What does average total cost show you? It shows you the cost of producing a typical unit of the good. Total cost divided by total output. And then you have marginal cost, which is basically the cost of producing one more unit of the good, the additional cost of producing one more unit of the good. And how do we calculate this? That is change in total cost. So this delta shows change. So change in total cost divided by total output. Change in total cost divided by change in total output. Okay, now think about this. Isha, the gradient of this curve, this is total cost. Now, the thing is that the gradient of this graph, the gradient, right, shows you marginal cost. Always remember this, right? The gradient of total cost graph shows you marginal cost. Gradient of total cost curve shows marginal cost. Now have a look at this. Shows you marginal cost. Okay. Now the thing is, if I have to get rid of this extra stuff, right? Okay. Now, what you need to know here is, think about this. So if I have to find out the gradient at this point, right? What I will do is I will draw a tangent line. I will draw a tangent line to this. How do I draw a tangent line? Let me use this option, right? So I'll draw a tangent line to this, right? And that will show me, how steep is the line. Similarly, if I have to find, the gradient at this point, so again, I will draw a tangent line like this, right? I'll draw a tangent line to this. Then similarly, if I have to find the gradient at this point, I'll draw a tangent line to this. Then if I have to find the gradient at this point, I'll draw a tangent line like this. And then similarly this, and then this, and then, this and this. Are you following me? Right? So the gradient of a line of a curve, basically, how do we find the gradient of a curve? We draw a tangent line to that and then see how much steep that line is. How much steep that line is. Now, this might be a little difficult for you to understand, but let's look at this one more time. So let's say I have to find the gradient at point A. I have to find the gradient at point B. I have to find the gradient at point C. I have to find gradient at point D, right? Where the slope will be the lowest. Where the slope will be the lowest, that is where the gradient is the lowest. Where the slope of the gradient line, E, F, G, H, right? Now, have a look at this. Now, how do I do that? I will draw a tangent line in each case. So this is the tangent line over here, right? This is the tangent line over here, right? Then you have a tangent line over here, right? Then you have a tangent line over here. Then you have a tangent line over here, right? Now you have to tell me that out of these lines, which is least steep? Which line is least steep? You have to tell me, right? that is basically the gradient. If the line is least steep, that means the gradient is low. If the line is steep, that means the gradient is more, right? So gradient is something like this, right? And then something like this, something like this, right? So out of these lines, which line do you think is least steep, right? So you know the steepness thing. Isha, are you following me or not, right? So you do know what steepness shows. This is more steep, right? So this is obviously steep. This would be, let's say, less steep, and this is even less steep and less steep, right? So steepness is, so out of all these lines, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, which of these do you think is least steep? Which line? This is a negative gradient, so basically we can just ignore this because, right. So out of these all lines, which of these? Okay, so you're still confused? Okay, so basically, right. Okay, so gradient is the steepness of the line. What is gradient? Gradient of a line is the steepness of the line, right? So if I have to make a curve like this, right, and then you have to see the steepness, right? So think about this. Here, if you think of it as you are driving a car, if you're driving a car and you have to drive your car up with this, and then this, and then this, right? So where is the line steep and where is the line least steep? At least, are you getting? So think about it. If this is a road, imagine this as a road and you're going uphill and you're going uphill, right? So this is a road and you're going uphill like this, right? Now, which parts would it be more difficult to drive like on the steepness? So this part, up till this part, you can tell. Up till this part, you can tell it's very steep. Up till this part, it's very steep. Yes or no? Then it becomes flatter. Then it becomes flatter over here. Then it becomes flatter over here. And then again, the steepness starts to increase. Isha, is this clear? Is this making sense? Yes or no, right? So imagine yourself, you're driving a car up on this hill and steepness will tell you, right? Steepness is basically how much steep, how much is the gradient, how much is the gradient, right? So this is steep, so gradient is more. Then it becomes flatter over here, then it becomes flatter over here, and then steepness again rises on this part of the slope, right? So this is exactly what you have to see in the graph, where the graph is steep, that is more gradient, right? So it is more steep over here, then it becomes a little flatter, and then it becomes steep again. I repeat. So this is becoming steeper, then it becomes a little flat, and then it starts to increase its steepness again. Are you getting me, right? So if you see, this part is a little flatter, this part is a little flatter. So where this part is flatter, that is where the gradient would be low, And the gradient is important because that is showing you the marginal cost. So all you have to do, forget about the gradient and forget about everything. All you have to see is where the steepness is less. On the total cost graph, where the steepness is less, that is where the marginal cost will be less, right? That is where the marginal cost would be less. Isha, is this making sense? Right? So let me draw another graph for you to understand this. Think about this. So if, let's say you have a graph like this, and then you have a graph like this, right? So let's say this is A and this is B. Where is the steepness decreasing? For which of the two curves is the steepness decreasing, and for which of the two curves is steepness increasing, right? So if you carefully evaluate this, for graph A, the steepness increases over time. The steepness is increasing as you're producing more quantity. So let's say this is more quantity on this, on the x-axis, and you have total cost on the y-axis. So if you think of curve A, the steepness increases as you produce more. As you move right on the x-axis, as you produce more quantity of the good, your steepness is increasing. On the other hand, for B, as you produce more quantity, as you move right on the x-axis, your steepness is decreasing. Is it making sense, right? Your steepness is decreasing like this. Does it make sense? right? So the idea is fairly simple. The idea is fairly simple that the idea is fairly simple that in the case of B, marginal cost is decreasing. Let me write that down for you. Marginal cost would decrease because for B I'm talking about, because the steepness is decreasing. Marginal cost will decrease as you produce more quantity for B, will decrease for graph B as more quantity is being produced, right? As more quantity is produced. And for graph A, it is the opposite. As more quantity is produced for graph A, it is opposite. It says that marginal cost will increase because it is going like this. Are you getting me? For graph A, what is the explanation? Marginal cost increases as more quantity is being produced. As more quantity is produced, because the graph is becoming more steep. Because the graph is becoming more steep. Does this help? Isha, does this help now? Right? So you have to see that whether the curve is becoming flatter. In this case, you could see for B, the graph was becoming flatter. Right? Initially, there was an increase, but then it was becoming flatter. And whereas for A, this is only becoming more and more steep. It is only becoming more and more steep. Right? So that is what you need to remember. So where was the steepness least? So the least steepness was at this part. So on this curve, the steepness was lowest at this part. So that's why I said that marginal cost will be minimized at OQ2. Right? So these questions are a little tricky, but we will practice a couple of those and we will, understand how to solve these. Okay, now the next question says, okay, we just did this one. The table shows the total cost of a firm. What is the average cost of producing 4 units of output? What is the average cost of producing 4 units of output? That should be easy. So you are given total cost on this column, you are given total output on this column, and is asking you about the average variable cost of producing 4 units. What is the average variable cost of producing 4 units? So we know that total cost is sum of fixed cost plus variable cost, right? So if we subtract fixed cost from total cost, we get variable cost. And then we have to divide that variable cost over output to find out average variable cost, right? So the answer should be A, 10, absolutely, right? Because when you're not producing anything, that is your fixed cost. So even when the output is 0, you can see, even when the output is 0, you could see that your total cost was 40. So this means that fixed cost is 40. So at 4 units, 80 minus 40 is how much? 80 minus 40 is 40. So 40 divided by 4 is 10. So average variable cost is 10. Okay, which condition must apply before a match can be regarded, before a market can be regarded as perfectly contestable? So we do know the definition of contestable market, where there are no entry and exit barriers. Right. So what do you think is the answer for 11? For 11, what should be the answer? Their answer should be D. Absolutely. The answer should be D. So 10 is A and 11 is D. Absolutely. Very good. Excellent. Next question. Okay. The question says the diagram shows the average and marginal revenue curves of a oligopolistic firm. OQ is the profit maximization quantity. Which curve could be the firm's marginal cost curve? Which could be the firm's marginal cost curve? Right. So do you remember I've always made the graph for oligopoly markets, and from what point the marginal cost curve used to go? From what part of the demand curve the marginal cost curve used to intersect? What do you think? Which curve could be the firm's marginal cost curve? Yeah. So it is C. Exactly. It always passes from point C, right? Do you remember? So do you remember when we used to make the graph for oligopoly, it used to look like this, right? So it used to look like this, that there is a kink in the demand curve like this. This is a kink in the demand curve like this. So on the y-axis, you have price and cost. And on the x-axis, you have the quantity. And on the x-axis, you have the quantity of the good, right? And then your marginal revenue is to the left of this. Your marginal revenue goes like this, right? It comes straight up to this part where there's a kink like this, right? And then there's a break in the marginal revenue curve, and then it goes like this. And for the marginal cost curve always used to pass from the break from the point where there's a break in the marginal revenue, right? So the answer should be C, right? So 12 is C. Very good. Absolutely. Let's move on. What is most likely to be found when comparing long-run equilibrium outcome in oligopolistic market with that in perfect competition? What is most likely to be found when comparing the long-run equilibrium outcome in oligopolistic competition with that in perfect competition? Right. A greater degree of excess capacity in monopolistic competition, higher level of profit in monopolistic competition, larger number of firms in oligopolistic competition, and more price elastic demand curve in monopolistic competition. What do you think is the answer? What is most likely to be found when comparing the long-run equilibrium outcome, right? No. So what did we discuss? Isha, do you remember that out of these two market structures, which market structure has more firms? Is it the perfect competition or is it the monopolistic competition? Which market structure has greater number of firms? Right? Perfect competition. Very good. So why could C not be the answer then? A larger number of firms, right? So C is saying that the number of firms in all monopolistic competition are more. Whereas we know that it is the perfect competition which has the greatest number of firms out of all the market structures. Out of all the market structures, the number of firms is greatest in perfect competition. So C could not be the answer. Also, B is incorrect. A higher level of profit in monopolistic competition. No, in the long run, both in perfect competition and in monopolistic competition. In long run, both in perfect competition and in monopolistic competition, you are earning normal profit. Is it making sense? Right, absolutely, very good. Then D is incorrect and more price elastic demand. No. Demand is perfectly elastic in perfect competition. So again, elasticity of demand is highest in perfect competition. So you can't say that it is higher in monopolistic competition. So that would be incorrect, right? So D is also incorrect, right? So then that leaves you with only one option, and that is excess capacity. What does excess capacity means? Think about this. Do you remember we said that in monopolistic competition, you're not producing at the point which is allocatively efficient. In monopolistic competition, firms are not producing to the point that is allocatively efficient. Think about this. This used to be a demand curve, which is also showing you the price. This used to be your marginal revenue, right? Then this is your marginal cost. And then since we're talking about the long run, right? So where the marginal revenue and marginal cost intersect, that is the profit maximization quantity. So let me write this down as QP. You take this up and see where is this intersecting. You see where is this intersecting with the demand curve, right? And then you make a curve like this where average total cost is taken into this, right? And goes like this, basically, right? This is your ATC. Okay, now think about this. So the idea is that monopolistic competition firms produces at the point where it can maximize its profit, and therefore profit maximization quantity is when marginal cost is equals to marginal revenue, right? Where these two curves intersect, marginal cost and marginal revenue, right? And What is allocatively efficient output level? Allocatively efficient output level is where price is equals to marginal cost. So this is your price, this is your marginal cost. Where are the two intersecting? The two are intersecting at this point, price and marginal cost. So this is allocatively efficient output level. So this is what it means, that there is excess capacity. So the firm could have produced more. The firm, monopolistic competition firm, could have produced more, but it's producing less. That is what excess capacity means, right? Okay, great. Now moving to the next question. What is not a source of market failure? What is not a source of market failure? Imperfect information, income inequality, monopoly, non-excludability. What is not a source of market failure? What do you think? What is not a source of market failure? Right? It's what products are non-excludable? Isha, so the products that are non-excludable, first let's check the answer for 13. 13 is A, right? So for 14, what is not a source of market failure? Think about this. Non-excludable products are public goods, right? From whom you can't exclude people. So we do know that private sector will never produce public goods because it's not profitable to produce those products, right? So private sector will not produce public goods because those are not profitable to produce, and that is why that is the cause of market failure. Are you getting me? So that is the cause of market failure. Isha? On the other hand, income inequality is not as such a cause of market failure, because that is neither productively inefficient, that is neither allocatively inefficient. That is neither productively nor allocatively inefficient. So that is why we say that income inequality is not a market failure, whereas no provision of public good is a market failure. Imperfect information, which we call information asymmetry, that is also market failure, and monopoly is also market failure, right? So the answer should be B. So 14 should be B, and 14 is B. Great. Okay. Now the next question says, the government wants to regulate the consumption of a demerit good in order to increase society's welfare. In which situation will society's net welfare increase? The fall in the marginal social benefit is greater than the fall in marginal social cost. In order to increase the society's net welfare. Margin greater than the fall in marginal social benefit. The second, fall in the total. Right. What do you think should be the answer? 15 should be B. Exactly. I also think it's B. Let's check. 15 should be B. 15 is D. The fall in the total social cost is greater than the fall in the total social benefit. Whoa, why not marginal? The government wants to regulate the consumption of demerit good in order to increase the society's net welfare. In which situation will the society's net welfare increase? In which situation will the society's, so in which situation? Okay, so I think it's not asking us about how much to produce. It's asking us that what would result in, they're talking about the total, net, got it, perfect, so that should be D. Okay, 16 says, which measure is least likely to help a household out of the poverty trap? Which measure least likely to help a household out of the poverty trap? Changing a universal benefit to a means tested benefit, increasing the threshold at which net income tax is paid, introducing a national minimum wage, reducing the basic rate of income tax. Reducing the basic rate of income tax out of the poverty trap. Which measure is least likely to help a household out of the poverty trap? Basic rate of income tax. D. reducing the basic rate of income tax. So if we're reducing the basic rate of income tax, that should help the poor, I think. Um, okay, let me think about this. Which measure is least likely to help a household out of the poverty trap? Um, Changing a universal benefit to a means tested benefit. Uh, mm, mm, which measure is least likely to help a household out of the poverty trap? Hmm. I think it should be, I think personally think it should be A. I'm not sure. So let's check. 16 is A. Okay. So let me give you the reasoning for that. So my reasoning is, Nisha, my reasoning is that think about this. B, C, and D are directly helping the poor families. What is poverty trap? When you're stuck in poverty and you can't get out of it, right? That's poverty trap. So B, C, and D are directly affecting and directly improving the welfare of the poor people. How so? Increasing the threshold, right? So if you increase the threshold, then obviously the people will not be paying taxes at a low rate of income, at a low amount of income. They will be paying taxes at a high amount of income. So B is helping the poor in that sense. C is introducing a national minimum wage. So national minimum wages, national minimum wage again help the poor with lower incomes, and that's also true. Reducing the basic rate of income tax, reducing the basic rate of income tax. Again, if you reduce the basic rate of income tax, the poor will benefit because obviously, you know, they are the ones who are benefiting more compared to the rich. Right. So question is saying what is least likely? So to if you want to get a family out of the poverty trap, which of these options will benefit them the least? Which of these will help them the least? Which measure is least likely to help a household out of the poverty trap? So which is effective but not very effective. That is what it's saying, right? So when you change, what is universal benefit? Universal benefit is something that helps everyone. That helps everyone, right? So if you cut that, right, it's a yeah. So if you change that universal benefit to a means tested benefit, that will help the poor, but perhaps not that very much, right? Because they were getting the benefit anyways. They were previously getting the benefit anyways. Right. Means tested means only to people who are most deserving of it, like income support programs, whereas universal benefit benefits everyone, like public transport or like child support program or like unemployment benefit, right? So universal benefits benefit everyone, right? Whether they are rich or they are poor, whereas mean tested only help the poor people, right? So if you convert it from universal to meme tested, it will not directly help the poor. Why? Because they were getting the benefit anyways. Through universal system, they were getting the benefit anyways. So now converting it to means tested would not help them a lot. Right? Okay. Now the next question says the addition to revenue which results from employing one additional unit of a factor of production, the quantities of all other factors of production remaining constant. This should be easy. What does this define? The addition to revenue which results from employing one additional unit of factor of production, the quantities of all other factors of production remaining constant. So what do you think? Right. MRP, marginal revenue product, right? So 17 should be C, right? So 17 should be C. 17 is C, right? Um, right. Which diagram shows the demand for and supply of labor? Which diagram shows the demand for and supply of labor? Which two areas represents economic rent? Which two areas represent economic rent? Do you remember what was economic rent? We discussed this in our class. Which two areas represent economic rent? Yeah. What do you think is the answer? Which two areas represents economic rent? Exactly, that's B. That's B, right? So do you remember we discussed this that if have a look at this. So area below wage and above supply is your economic rent. So in this case, where this is the normal downward sloping demand curve, this is normal upward sloping supply curve. So area below wage, so this is below wage and above supply. So this A is economic rent. And in other case where the supply is perfectly inelastic, where the supply is perfectly inelastic, like in this case, this entire region is your economic rent. So 1 and 4 is your economic rent. And in this case, where supply is perfectly elastic, in this case, where supply is perfectly elastic, all of the area is transfer earnings. All the area is transfer earnings. Are you getting me? So your answer is B, 1 and 4. Okay, now the next question says, next question says, here it is. The table shows the short-run production function of a firm with labor as the variable factor of production. If workers are hired in a perfectly competitive labor market at a wage rate of 50 per dollar, when will the labor cost per unit of the output be at its lowest? In a perfectly competitive labor market at a wage rate of 50 per day, when will the labor cost per unit of output be lowest? Right. So do you know how to calculate this? You just need to divide the total cost of labor with the total output versus when will the labor cost per unit of output be the lowest. First of all, you have to calculate the total labor cost, and then you have to divide that with the number of output that is being produced, and that will give you the labor cost per unit, right? So what I basically mean here is, have a look at this. So if you hire one person,